Hello and welcome to Unit 2, Developing an Advocacy Strategy to Build an Enabling Environment for Evaluation Part 1. My name is Neha Karkara. This video lecture will take you through the following topics: the importance of strategic planning in advocacy, the 9-question model for advocacy strategy planning, how to determine advocacy goal and target audiences to influence national evaluation policies, strategies, and systems, and understanding the policy-making cycle to determine entry points for advocacy. Let's begin with the first topic, strategic planning in advocacy. Advocacy planning is the development of an overall change strategy that embodies your vision and reflects where you are, where you want to go, and how you can get there. In other words, advocacy planning is a disciplined effort to influence fundamental policy decisions in a strategic way. Advocacy planning is important for building an enabling environment for evaluation because it will help you to break down your advocacy goals into achievable stepping stones. It will help you to use the right tools for advocacy and also help you use scarce resources wisely. Advocacy planning will also help you to find partners, supporters, and champions in your advocacy work. It will help you to get the advocacy timing correct and capitalize on new advocacy opportunities. Now let's move on to how we can go about strategic advocacy planning. While there are many different advocacy strategy planning frameworks, here we propose using the 9 questions model for strategic advocacy planning for building an enabling environment for evaluation. The model is useful for long-term strategic advocacy planning. However, it is also a useful checklist for making a quick advocacy response towards promoting national evaluation policies and systems. It can be applied to advocacy actions at all levels: local, national, regional, and global. This 9-question model will take you step by step from identifying the core issues you want to advocate for to drawing up a specific action plan to implement your advocacy work. Let's go through these 9 questions. Question 1. What do we want? This requires determining your advocacy goals. Question 2. Who can give it to us? This requires thinking about your advocacy audience. Question 3. What do they need to hear? This requires determining your advocacy messages. Question 4. Who do they need to hear it from? Think about who will be the most effective messenger or messengers for your advocacy. Question 5. How do we get them to hear it? Determine how will the message get delivered. Question 6. What have we got? Consider your resources and strengths. Question 7. What do we need to develop? Also consider your challenges and gaps. Question 8. How do we begin? Determine your first steps. Question 9. How will we know it's working or not working? Plan your advocacy, monitoring, and evaluation efforts. While you do not have to go through the 9 questions in strict order, you will need to constantly revisit them as you plan and implement your strategy. In this unit, we are focusing on question 1 and question 2 of the 9 questions model. The remaining questions are addressed in Unit 3 of this e-learning course. But before we go further, let's demystify what advocacy strategy and advocacy tactics mean. This terminology can often create confusion. Now, tactics are specific advocacy actions or activities that are undertaken to capture the attention of people in power in relation to your issue. Example: circulating petitions, writing letters to policymakers, and giving media interviews. However, strategy is an overall map that guides the use of these tactics towards clear goals. In other words, strategy is a hard-nosed assessment of where you are, where you want to go, and how you can get there. Now let's go deeper into question 1. What do we want? In finding answers to this question, we would need to first analyze the situation, second, generate evidence for advocacy, and third, choose context-specific advocacy priorities. Analyzing the situation. Advocacy begins with the identification of an issue or problem that the organization agrees to support in order to promote a policy change. The situation analysis forms the foundation for any program or advocacy plan. It provides the analysis of the problem that you're trying to address and looks at the ways in which it can be solved. By creating a solid evidence base, the situation analysis provides a starting point for setting advocacy priorities and a baseline against which to measure progress. There are several ways to perform a quick analysis of the situation. For instance, you could perform a review of available situation analysis and monitoring of trends to determine the evaluation advocacy issue. You could also engage active think tanks, activists, and stakeholders to get an assortment of ideas that can help define the problem and solutions that can be addressed by evaluation advocacy. Developing a problem and solutions tree. One way to undertake a situation analysis is to create a visual representation of your problem, its root causes, consequences, and its solution by developing a problem and solutions tree. A problem and solution tree analysis is one of the many forms of project planning and is well developed among many development agencies. It is a visual tool of analyzing a particular problem and its solution based around mapping the different aspects of the problem. The tool is available in the reading material at the end of the lecture. Generating evidence. After determining the problem and solutions that can be addressed by evaluation advocacy, it is critical to generate and utilize evidence that will support this advocacy. For effective advocacy, evidence may include all information that is collected through a systematic, credible process. Top-end evidence may include a policy evaluation, empirical research, and expert knowledge that can stand up to scrutiny. Moreover, gathering evidence supports many stages of the advocacy process. It is required to identify the problem, select the advocacy issue, and develop goals, and also to craft messages, expand support, and monitor and evaluate progress in advocacy. A reputation for thorough research and credible evidence is important in providing legitimacy so that decision makers take what you have to say seriously. Above all, remember, evidence can be a potential tool in advocacy, but can also be an approach in itself. That is through creating debate, opening policy space, building national capacity, and using the research to gain adherence and overcome opposition. However, evidence is never enough on its own to influence policy making. It must be complemented by sound political analysis and by building networks and partnerships. An example here is the work of the Senegalese Evaluation Association, or Seneval, that used evidence generated through a diagnostic study of national evaluation capacities to open debate on the value of evaluation in Senegal. Through a documentation review, survey, and semi-directive interviews with key stakeholders, the study showed a mature evaluation practice with more than 90 evaluation cases reported on. It also tried to assess the quality of evaluation practice in Senegal through the meta-evaluation of 2 evaluations. However, certain deficiencies were also detected in the management of evaluations. The participatory process of undertaking the diagnostic study helped to raise the process issue with a number of stakeholders, highlighting the need to form partnerships for advocacy as well as to create evidence to support such advocacy. Senegal has since then advocated for the institutionalization of evaluation, targeting mainly the high-level government offices such as the Presidency of the Republic, the General Directorate of Planning, and the Government Inspection Office. This long-running advocacy has contributed to the government's decision to establish in the President's office a commission for the evaluation and monitoring of public policies and programs. In terms of how we can go about generating evidence for evaluation advocacy, there are 2 useful tools. The first tool is a matrix that can be used to plan research that may be required to generate evidence for evaluation advocacy. The tool is available in the reading material at the end of this lecture. The second is a tool that can be used to diagnose the national M&E systems and generate evidence for advocacy. This diagnostic tool can be used as a checklist to assess the progress and gaps in a country's M&E system development over time. It can also be used as a planning tool to assist in identifying and planning for short-term and long-term requirements of a successful national M&E system. This tool is also useful to inform and educate stakeholders on the direction and pace of the work to help build a national M&E system. The tool is also available in the reading material. Now moving on to choosing context-specific advocacy priorities. Now that we have identified the evaluation-related issue, or problem and its solution that can be addressed through advocacy, as well as generated evidence that can support such advocacy, it is time to choose a context-specific priority for your advocacy effort. Choosing an advocacy priority becomes particularly critical, especially for coalitions such as WOPEs that involve several partners. There may be several advocacy interests and agendas within a WOPE, but advocacy should be undertaken for one issue at a time. Remember, the advocacy priority you start with can build momentum for the next chosen issue. For example, an initial advocacy priority for a WOPE can be to create monitoring and evaluation units in all government departments. Such advocacy efforts can later provide momentum to advocate for an equity and gender-sensitive national evaluation policy. Here is another tool that you can use as a checklist for choosing an advocacy priority. The criteria in this checklist, example around the importance of the issue and practical considerations, can be adapted to suit the context of a WOPE or an individual organization. This tool is also available in the reading material. Now moving on to question 2, who can give it to us? Answering question 2 involves first analyzing stakeholders and power holders to identify key targets that can help to build an enabling environment for evaluation, and second, undertaking a policy analysis to identify entry points for advocacy with the target audiences. Analyzing stakeholders. There are 4 steps in a stakeholder analysis. First, identify the key stakeholders, institutions and individuals that could potentially affect or be affected by the proposed intervention. For example, your national stakeholders might include senior government officials such as the Office of the President or Prime Minister, a central government agency such as the Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Planning, and other individual ministries, or a senior M&E committee, the National Statistical Agency, civil society, private sector, and other non-public agencies. Second, assess the stakeholder interests and the potential impact of advocacy on these interests. For example, what are the stakeholders' expectations in advocating for an enabling environment for evaluation? What benefits are likely to result for the stakeholders from this advocacy work? What resources might the stakeholder be able and willing to mobilize for it? What stakeholder interests conflict with the advocacy goals? Third, assess the influence and the importance of the identified stakeholders. Influence here refers to the power that the stakeholders might have in creating an enabling environment for evaluation. Importance here relates to how important the active involvement of the stakeholder is for achievement of the advocacy goal. 4. Outline a stakeholder participation strategy. This plan can help us determine what would be the most appropriate way to involve different stakeholders at various stages of the advocacy effort. To help you undertaking a stakeholder analysis, you can use a matrix to map out stakeholders' interests, influence, and importance. Please look up this tool in the reading material for this unit. The information from this mapping will be useful later to undertake a power mapping, which is coming up ahead. Power analysis. After you have completed a stakeholder analysis, you can use its information to undertake a power analysis. This analysis helps in identifying the key decision makers, both institutional and individual, who hold power or influence over the issue. The task is to identify who makes the decisions and who can directly influence these decisions. These decision makers can be allies or opponents. Remember, as your advocacy progresses, opponents may shift to become allies or vice versa. When developing an advocacy strategy, it is important to examine the capacities and abilities to influence the opponents to make them less opposed, passive opponents, or even allies. It is also important to increase the strength of allies without power, as well as persuade passive allies with power to provide levels of credible support and become active. And lastly, influence active opponents to become passive opponents. Here is a tool to help you undertake a power mapping. In this tool, stakeholders are mapped on a grid according to their likely position, allies or opponents, on the change being desired and according to the level of influence, which could be high or low. This tool is available in the reading material for this unit. Now let's move on to identifying target audiences and partners. Using information from the stakeholder and power analysis, we are now ready to identify the target audiences and influentials for our advocacy. By target audience, we mean decision makers with the authority to effect the outcome for the advocacy directly. These are the individuals who must actively approve the change you are seeking. These decision makers are the primary targets of an advocacy strategy. The influentials, or the secondary target audience, are the individuals and groups that can influence the decision makers or the target audience. Often you may not be able to reach decision makers themselves, however effective your advocacy planning. Instead, your advocacy may need to be targeted at those who do have access to decision makers. Influentials may include the media, academia, donors, the UN, other government departments, and civil society organizations, among others. Some members of a target audience can also be influentials if they can influence other decision makers. For example, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Planning might influence each other's opinions. Therefore, they are both a target audience and influentials. The stakeholder and power analysis, along with the identification of target audience and influentials, can help point towards potential strategic partners in advocacy work. This goes further than analyzing who is your ally or opponent. You have to check how committed your allies are in joining you in political action. Are they willing to spend more time, money, energy, and share information to bring about change in the use of evaluation? You can learn more about strengthening partnerships in advocacy in Unit 6 of this course. Now here is a tool that you can use to undertake a comprehensive target analysis. Upon identifying your key targets for advocacy, you can ask yet more questions that will clarify exactly where your advocacy should be targeted in order to convince them. Example, what do your targets know about the issue? What is their attitude towards it? What do they really care about? Who has influence over them? What influence or power do they have over the issue? This tool is also available in the reading material. Here it is interesting to note the work of Indonesian Development Evaluation Community, or INDEC, on their advocacy efforts with various stakeholders to promote evaluation. For example, they work with government officials at the national and local level so they can have capacity to demand and manage evaluation as well as use evaluation findings. They also work with members of parliament so they know how to demand and use evaluation findings to enhance their supervision mandate. INDEC also works with the academia so they can develop and enhance the theoretical thinking on evaluation. It also works with M&E professionals so they can improve their practice in M&E, and also independent evaluators so they can improve the evaluation practice. INDEC also works with the media so they can play a bigger role in mainstreaming evaluation. In working with these stakeholders, INDEC uses a range of advocacy tactics. One of INDEC's key advocacy event was a national evaluation seminar on promoting an M&E system for Indonesia's economic development plan. The key messages were shared with the media through press releases. Overall, the focus was on lobbying and building partnership with key government institutions. Eventually, an M&E working group was formed for Indonesia's economic development plan that was supported by the government and UNDP. 6 months later, an M&E system was established. This example from Indonesia shows the importance of working with a wide group of stakeholders, targeting them through various advocacy actions to bring about a culture of evaluation. Now let's move on to policy analysis. After we have determined our target audiences and potential partners, the next stage requires us to undertake a policy analysis. Policy analysis involves understanding political systems and structures of the country, which form an important entry point for exerting influence. For example, at the national level, the key formal political structures can be targets for advocacy, which usually include the legislature, such as the Congress and the Parliament, the executive, such as the President, Vice President, Prime Minister, and the Council of Ministers, the court, bureaucracy, and the political parties. These players and structures respond to other policy players, including the local and international private sector, donors, citizens, and each other. How they operate depends in part on the type of political system in which they live. Second, the policy analysis involves understanding the policy-making process. Understanding the policy-making process or processes leading up to laws, policies, and other decisions in your country, and who is involved in it, is yet another step in further refining the analysis of your context. Knowing where certain issues are dealt with, who is responsible for them, at what time decisions are taken, can allow you to have maximum impact on decisions. Now let's see the policy-making cycle. The policy-making process has 4 different overlapping phases: agenda setting, formulation and enactment, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. Each phase is shaped by different power dynamics and involves different players, both inside and outside the formal political process. For an advocate, it is important to remember that you can have influence at each stage of the policy-making cycle. At the same time, timing in policy influencing is essential. You must know who is taking decisions within that structure, but equally important is to know when a decision is being taken. Get familiar with the timetable of the actions and events which influence policy development and the timing of decision making. Factor in these significant dates or periods in your advocacy plan. This analysis of the decision-making process will help you think about concrete actions that are required for a target audience. With this, we come to the end of Unit 2. Thank you for taking this video lecture.